What's up, Rockstars? Today I'm going to be talking about first impressions and if they're a good thing or a bad thing. Thank you to my channel sponsor Into the AM. As a company that believes hard work and a great product is a proper way to conduct business, I am delighted to have them as part of the channel. They have some of the coolest graphic t-shirts around and an absolute best fit and feel that has continually exceeded my expectations. With new shirts arriving all the time and other products like boxers, hats, and even a monthly shirt club, I wholeheartedly recommend them to you. Check out the link in my description of this video for an exclusive 10% off everything they sell. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons and YouTube members. It is through their financial support that this channel is possible. Guys, thank you so much for that support so that I can make the videos that I want and pet Jasper constantly too. But seriously, guys, thank you so much. There's a link down below if you wish to support the channel. If you like the videos that I make or anything like that, even $1 a month can help out a lot. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. With that, let's talk about first impressions, because there's a few things here. There's the first impressions as a consumer where you buy a game and then you play it. And then there's the reviewer first impression, right? Where the reviewer has an initial impression of the game and then shares it. Two sides of the same coin, I feel, and I'll explain why I feel that way. So let's start with simply the consumer side of things, right? So as a consumer, right, as somebody who spends thousands of dollars every year on this hobby to play and enjoy and own more board games than I can possibly play, because that's how we do things here, first impressions matter a lot. So if you think about it, it's kind of like the excuse of, like, let's say a bad first impression, right? Like, for instance, Hate. I love the game of Hate, but the worst game of Hate you will ever play is the first one you play. And that's because it's very campaign-based, and what makes it really good is being able to customize your village and your units and do all that kind of stuff. So you have a set of mercenaries, and you've equipped them this way, and they're doing this, and that is kind of the interesting thing, and you have a lot more options to do in the village and stuff like that. Before you have that, you don't have a lot of luck mitigation or manipulation or customization in your units and stuff like that. You just can simply do less. So that's a game that starts out at its worst and gets better the more you play it. Which is not ideal, by the way. I feel like for things to actually hit the table, you need to have a great first impression. One of the things I have found as somebody who, typically teaches the game and runs the game and, will present it to the group to play, is that first impressions are really what defines future plays. And what I mean by that is, as somebody who normally reads the rule book, plays a lot of games, typically I'm a bit of a power player when it comes to, getting optimal moves and stuff like that. Not to say I'm like great at games, but just like I already understand the game very well and kind of go into it, maybe even with prior experience. And in a competitive game, if I just stomp the person who's new, they are often not wanting to play again. And that's because their first impression of it was bad. They weren't able to do any cool stuff. They didn't really learn a whole lot. They just died a whole bunch, right? It's not ideal. So it's one of those things where when I first play a game with someone, I do try to kind of go a little light. Just essentially, I want to have fun and I want them to have fun, and I'm presenting a fun time. So I give them opportunities to attack me and stuff like that. If I can remember. Sometimes I get competitive and I play, but that's a whole different subject perhaps. For this video though, that initial play session defines if they ask to play again. And so if you play, if it's a long setup time, right? And so you're like, oh yeah, let's go play this game. And then, you have to wait 2 hours for the game to really be fully set up and everything all set and all that. And then you're finally sitting down and then you get to play. And then they have short turns, or everybody else has long turns, or it takes a while to get to them, or whatever, right? There's stuff even outside the actual raw game mechanics that can just ruin a first impression. And I feel that's very important to nail down. I mean, if you think about the opening scene of movies, like Lord of the Rings, right? If Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, had started in the Shire with just Frodo sitting next to a tree and Gandalf showing up and all that, as opposed to the let's see an epic fight between elves, humans, and Sauron, and he gets his ring cut off and all that. That's how it starts out. and it nails you. Now, as a fan of Lord of the Rings, I would have been, I would have been fine just consuming Lord of the Rings, especially as well made as that. But the idea, especially for somebody who doesn't know what they're getting into, is you don't just start in a very kind of slow, okay, this guy's having a birthday and we spend half an hour just kind of dilly-dallying around a whole lot. No, it starts out in this huge epic battle, right? That's what that is. If you look at video games particularly, they were played a long time with these like slow tutorials that just kind of drag on and aren't super exciting and all that. So now they don't do that anymore. More than often, like if Ghost of Tsushima, I just got done playing a few months ago. And it starts out with this like huge battle scene where you're on a horse and you're running through. You don't even know like how to use items yet or anything like that. It doesn't matter. It's just hooking you into the story, making you interested and making you want to have, you're invested in this and you want to, do more. So that then by the time it's kind of doing the little tutorial thing, you can just kind of go through that and you're still having fun and all that. And so those first impressions as a consumer matter a lot. It really does. Your initial take on that will color your view on it. Now that's going to put me slightly towards the reviewer side of things, because one of the things I do when I review, and every reviewer I think is different, but I purposely don't watch other people's reviews. I try to avoid even a whole lot of opinion on the game and stuff like that. Like people saying, oh, I hated how slow the turns were, right? Because then you can go into it with that mindset of, I need to really pay attention to the turns orders. Is a turn order, and that's not the normal necessarily experience that a consumer would have. And it's kind of the same thing there, right? Where like you're trying to just have that first impression. Now, for reviews, Jasper's left us. He's bored of this video. Hopefully you're not. When it comes to sharing first impressions as a reviewer, there's pros and cons. I think it's important to note if it really picks up in season 2, right? There's always the joke of, season 1, they're getting their footing and they don't really hit their stride, but by season 2, they're on all cylinders and it's great. You see that on like TV series all the time, right? Oh my gosh, it's really good there too. Or even, I've been reading The Wheel of Time. I'm on book 11 now. I just got done with the prequel, and in preparation for the TV show. And, the first book of Wheel of Time I enjoyed it, but it's very much bog standard. It's very much a Lord of the Rings thing. And then book 2 is right? But you can't necessarily be like, hey, go spend 30 hours reading this book, because trust me, the next 30 hours is awesome, right? Like it's a hard sell when you say it like that. But it is a good thing to note, because at the end of the day, there are people that will sit through season 1, so they can enjoy season 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. And I think as a reviewer, it's good to have that information. In other words, have more than that basic, first impression, right? If you played Hate once and then reviewed it, you're going to have a much different review than if you played it a whole bunch and then reviewed it. Because you can say, hey, yeah, it starts out, kind of less good. I would say I still enjoy it, but less good. But then it ends up being something fantastic and great at the end. So that's important to note. Except, again, for that consumer side of things, where it's also important to note when it's really crappy. You can't, and I know Alex, I think for Board Game Co. does this, where he doesn't do a review right after playing the game. Because you kind of are on that high, especially like if you had just won a big battle and you're all pumped up or whatever, and then you do that, it's going to color your opinion. Because at the end of the day, whether it's the first impression or not, your most recent thing is the impression you have. We talk about this at work all the time, where, going up to like your performance review, if your last 3 months were super solid, they might forget about, 8 months ago when it wasn't so much, right? Because the thing in your brain, in your memory, is this fantastic experience. So that's really important. However, because that whole getting it to the table is so important, I think it's wonderful to always keep first impressions in mind. So I actually try to do this, which is why I know Hate works that way. I don't always convey it well in my reviews. I'm always growing as a reviewer. I hope to continue to do that. But I think it's important to make a distinction there between first impression and overall impression, right? Because you got to tell them if season 1 kind of sucks, right? That's important to know, because as a reviewer, it's almost kind of your job to play the game, right? But as a consumer, you just trade it in for another game, or have it dust collect on a Calyx shelf or whatever, right? Like, you're not going to force yourself to necessarily play something you didn't have a lot of fun with. So I think first impressions are really, really great. The caution here is on the reviewer's side, getting it wrong, which I've done before. Nobody's perfect. No game is perfect. I'm not perfect. But, hopefully always improving. But the problem with the first impression is you have so little time with it that you may have done it wrong. And the problem is consumers do that too. I was just talking to a patron who was like, oh my gosh, I've been playing this game wrong the last 5 times we've been playing it because the rulebook didn't explain it well or whatever. And so you can play a game wrong and then you certainly don't want to review it when you play it wrong. I think that it's hard. I think the ideal thing is to have a first impressions section, or at least speak on the first impressions that a game has, but not actually reviewing it based off the first impression. Which brings me to a final point of when you have to. So there are, especially for us that review prototypes and board games that are on Kickstarter. And the case for that, by the way, is that's the time that they're asking for your money. And so it's great to know where they're at, what your opinion is initially, knowing that it's not the final game that's going to be delivered, but this is where your wallet gets taken money out of it. So it's good to know at least where the product is from there, right? But sometimes stuff can be in development and can change. It can do this and go do that, or the rulebook's in a non-final. Sometimes it's not even all in English, right? So it's hard. I was just thinking of Resident Evil, which I loved. My wife has asked to play it several times since we've already played it after the review. Always a good sign. It's a single mission without all of the stuff. It doesn't have the danger track. There's a lot missing from that experience, and so when I talk about it. It is kind of a first impression because I haven't gone through an entire campaign at all, right? I've just played this one mission a few times because that's all that's there available. And so yeah, it's kind of hard. I think communication is obviously key, but I think for either doing the review or consuming the review, first impressions are vitally important. I really think they are, even if they're not perfect, because neither is most people's first play session, right? A first impression is really about as close to a consumer experience as you can get in that sense. And then you just got the game and you played it and you're like, well, from what I played, it was kind of, maybe I'm playing something wrong. I don't know. But as a reviewer, you might keep going. You might ask the dev, you might do that. And as a consumer, you might do that, or you might just shelve it. So first impression, I think, is hugely important to convey and to understand in board games. And I think it's more important than ever for board games to start having a great first impressions. I think a lot of times it's ignored, and I don't think that's appropriate. It needs, I think the first mission should always just be all about essentially having fun and, getting you used to the controls, for instance, right? If you can't beat it, right, I think Deep Madness is kind of like this, where it's the win percentage is low. There's a lot of people who just sort of well, I can't even beat the first level. I'm done. The Dark Souls journalists quit on, and you don't want that. So first impressions from the development side of things needs to be high as well. Developers need to definitely hone in on, okay, the person just got, that's why I'm so big, by the way, on reviewing components, on looking at the box, on seeing how everything punches out, because your first experience with a board game is the unboxing, is opening of the box. Then it's the rule book, and then it's the game. By the time you are playing the game, you are 2 impressions already in. So if you botch the components and you botch the rule book, you already have 2 bad experiences before you've ever done one game mechanic actually playing it. So first impressions, very important. I'm going to try to focus on it more. And I guess let me know if you disagree, for instance. We'll, I think, all try to figure out how to balance that an experience with the game with sometimes that's a good thing. So anyway, that's my food for thought for today, guys. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Again, there's a link down below to Patreon if you so wish. It would be great to have you guys there. I do audio updates, Discord, all that kind of stuff. It's a fun little group there for sure. All right, take care, guys.